Well, good evening and welcome to another episode of Doc Talk with Dr. G. We welcome you every Thursday at 7:30 Doc Talk, and we will cover a broad range of topics related to health and wellness, particularly focusing on ethical evidence-based medicine and how to get answers without the influence of those that are profiting, that are biased, and maybe even deceitful. So we've had some great feedback from the last few episodes. We've covered everything from recovering from organized medicine, understanding the influences that shape a doctor and his behavior and his medical practice, understanding the influence of regulators and government and so forth in terms of the medical industry. And we've covered from cell to birth. We've covered the immune system. And tonight is no exception with respect to hot topics. We're going to investigate the multi-billion-dollar weight loss industry, and you'll see that it's influenced the entire globe. As the prevalence of obesity increases, so does the influence of the weight loss industry and the amount of money that they're making as a result of the obesity epidemic. So it's a very exciting program. So without any further ado, let's dive into the presentation. So I've titled the presentation, Investigating Weight Loss Industry. Is it burning calories or burning your money? And we can see basically the last few years, the trend in the global obesity incidence. And here you can see worldwide where the top leaders are in obesity. And the USA gets the gold medal for obesity, the most obese country per capita in the entire world. Followed by Mexico. There's a competition between Australia and England. But look, Canada per capita is number 5 in the industrial world, actually in the entire world, including the developed world as well as the underdeveloped world. Of course, obesity is not an issue with most underdeveloped countries. But you can see Canada is right up there. And what's really disturbing also is the increasing trend toward childhood obesity. You can see boys are slightly more obese than girls, but children and adolescents between the ages of 5 to 19 are now approaching 20% incidence of obesity. That means about 1 in 5 children or young adolescents are obese in Canada, and the trend is continuing to rise into 2023. Now, of course, there are many benefits of weight control. There are the medical benefits that prevents or treats comorbid conditions such as hypertension, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and a plethora of other diseases can be prevented and can be reversed in many cases with weight loss and weight control long term. And of course, there's the psychological benefits. So you look and feel better when you're at closer to your ideal weight, when you are not carrying all that heavy weight, you feel better. And we're going to talk about some of the psychological motivations for long-term weight control as well today. Now, look at the weight loss market. This is the global trends. 2017, the weight loss industry earned close to $200 billion worldwide. And just last year, that number increased to $250 billion in revenue worldwide. And it is expected and projected that in the next 5 years, it'll approach $400 billion in revenue. So obviously, lots and lots and lots of money to be had. And so, of course, there's going to be contamination by bias and profit. And so tonight, the key is to identify objective studies that are not designed by those that stand to profit from the sales of the product or the program, but are designed by objective third parties that have no vested profit interest. So try to filter that out as much as possible. Now look at the weight loss market. Now, if you look at every other country except for North America, Europe, Asia, Middle East and Africa, and South America, all of them combined make up about 50% of the weight loss market. That's investing into weight loss programs. Look at this. North America, including Canada and the United States, make up about 50% of what is spent on the weight loss industry and weight loss programs. So you can see, obviously, we have a huge share of the market, if you will, as far as expenditures and wanting to spend money on weight loss programs. So, in summary, today in this 30-minute episode, we're going to look at the effectiveness of major programs. Are they really effective? And we're going to look at short-term effectiveness up to a year. But then, even more importantly, is long-term effectiveness. Can that weight that's lost initially in the first few months be kept off? And we're going to ask the question, well, why not just do it on your own? Are these programs actually better than just doing it on your own? So we're going to address that question, at least in the short term. And then we're going to look at strategies for maintaining weight control. What does literature show? What is evidence-based that tells us the things that we can do without spending a penny that will actually result in long-term weight control? Whether we've invested into a program or whether we have not, just there are certain things that you can do that don't cost you anything that will definitely help to maintain weight, and these things don't cost anything. So we all know the plethora of programs that are available. So I'm going to just hit the key ones. These are the key categories and the key trademarks of these programs. So of course is low carb, which has been extremely popular. So that is, of course, the Atkins diet, low carb, high protein. And then also in there, of course, is the increasingly popular keto program, which is initially designed by South Beach, and trademark is South Beach Keto program. Then there's low fat. Program. The Anish program is one of the biggest ones, but there's also multiple other low fat programs that are available. Then there's a high protein programs, which includes the Dukan diet, the Paleo diet, and Atkins as well. So there's a crossover. Atkins is low carb, high protein as well. So it covers both those categories. And then there's the so-called balanced programs that aren't particularly honing in on protein or fats, but generally honing in on calorie control and weight control based on portion. So, of course, one of the biggest ones in the industry is Weight Watchers. And then there's also the Mediterranean diet, which is also increasingly popular as well. And then there's a meal replacement program. So these are programs, of course, where they give you an alternate to the meals that you go out and buy. So you're actually spending a lot of money on their particular recipes and programs. So this includes, of course, one of the most common one, which is Jenny Craig, the Nutrisystem program, and the Slim Fast program. There's also OptiFast program. There's many of these programs where, in addition to enrolling in a program and paying an enrollment fee for the service, you're also paying for their food. So essentially, you're ordering their food as well. Now, we're going to look at comparison of the various weight loss programs. And this is a method that I used for the program tonight. I did a literature search using Medline, using 2 or 3 different search engines. Last time we talked about the importance of choosing a search engine that's not biased, that's not profit-driven or commercial. I looked for meta-analysis studies. These are large combination studies where they look at several different studies together, and within that, we are trying to get randomized control studies as well within the meta-analysis. So, of course, very important, I look for unbiased studies. So that means no funding by the program. I found many studies were actually funded by the company that's studying their own product. So obviously, you have to dismiss that, because there's no way there can be no bias in that. It's kind of like, if I could use an example, like a politician investigating himself and saying, "Oh, I'm clear. I'm clear of any ethical misconduct." I won't mention anybody in particular. I don't want to get too political, but just that's the paradigm. You can't investigate yourself and expect that you're going to be objective. It's just impossible. And again, I looked at some specific randomized controlled studies on their own, as well as within the meta-analysis as well. And if you recall from last week, looking at evidence-based medicine, your increasing quality of evidence goes up a triangle, and randomized controlled studies are the third most strong programs and designs as far as evidence-based. And a analysis, a critical appraisal of a topic and article follows that. And then the most compelling, the strongest evidence comes from systematic reviews, or so-called meta-analysis, where an author or a group of authors looks at the entire literature and then combines the studies, preferably randomized controlled studies, and then comes up with a summary, if you will, what's called a meta-analysis, to come up with a final conclusion as, yes, there are, 12 studies or 20 studies on this topic, and the majority of them came up with this conclusion as opposed to looking at one study in isolation. Now, the results were this. So I did a literature search, and again, I used the three main engines. I did use Safari, I used DuckDuckGo, and I used Brave, which is a really new one. And the latter two, DuckDuckGo and Brave, don't appear to have any commercial interests, and came up with really good studies there. So I looked for meta-analysis studies, and I found many meta-analysis studies, but some of them were contaminated by funding by the company. I found there very few unbiased studies. Very few studies were not funded by the company. For example, like I found one that was funded by Merck. It was a product. It was basically a replacement, a food replacement. And the authors admitted that technically there's a conflict of interest because they're being funded by the company that stands to profit from a outstanding result from that study. So I ruled out all those studies, and then I looked at randomized controlled studies, especially within a meta-analysis as well. But sometimes a standalone randomized good control study is also very strong as well. Now, let's start with the first question. Comparing weight loss programs, what are the results? So I did find an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, or what we call JAMA, in 2014. And this was a short-term study looking at the programs up to 1 year, so 12 months. And they compared low carb versus low fat. This was one of the best studies that I found. So low carb and a low fat program. So the Atkins and keto diet versus a low fat diet. Now they looked at 48 randomized controlled trials in the literature, over 7,000 patients. So this would be considered right up there in the top of the triangle in terms of quality of design. And this is a study here. It appears in 2014 JAMA, which says comparison of weight loss among named diet programs in overweight and obese adults in meta-analysis. A group of authors, and it was a very well-designed study, and they were very fair. They looked at all the studies and analyzed all 48 studies. And this was their conclusion. This was their findings and their conclusion. This is what they found. So they found that a low-carb diet in the first 6 months was slightly better than a low-fat diet. So the weight loss was 0.74 kilograms more for the low-carb than low-fat. But by the time they reached a year, the difference was only 0.02 kilograms. So essentially, they were comparable. This is what we call in the medical analysis statistically insignificant. In other words, it's too small. And the statisticians look at the result, and they came up with the conclusion that essentially at 12 months, the two programs are identical. So you can extract from this, I think, a very solid conclusion that in the first year, you're going to lose weight with either program, low carb or low fat. It includes low carb would be the keto. But at 12 months, there's really no difference whether you started with a low fat or low carb. You're going to end up losing approximately the same amount of weight, which on average here is approximately 7 kilograms. So this is a really good study. So it really answers the question. But keep in mind that's 12 months. So we're going to explore, well, what happens after those 12 months? What happens if people fall off the diet? And how do we maintain that 7 kilogram weight loss? I think that's one of the biggest enigmas in the weight loss industry, in the weight loss paradigm is, yes, you can lose weight. You can lose weight quickly. You can lose weight within 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. But can you keep that weight off? And we'll address that question as well. Now, this is another study that was, again, short-term, up to 12 months, and appeared in the Annals of Internal Medicine and appeared in the year 2015, so April 2015. And the title was Efficacy of Commercial Weight Loss Programs, an Updated Systematic Review. And this is what I found with this also very strong study looking at comparison up to 12 months of different weight loss programs. So they compared 4 plans versus education alone. So in other words, the control group were people that just got education in a doctor's or nurse's office, and they didn't go on any formal diet. They just got instructions in terms of education on nutrition. Whereas the others in the actual experimental group entered into a weight loss program. So these were the 4 programs that were studied. So Atkins, Weight Watchers, the Jenny Craig, and OptiFast program. So obviously, a good study. Basically, they said, okay, are you better off to be on the formal weight loss program, industrial weight loss program, or is it just as well to just get some education and some coaching? So let's move on. So they had 45 randomized controlled studies. So that's a robust number of studies and well-designed studies. So again, this is a meta-analysis. So they looked at program versus the education, just simply education alone. So at 12 months, these are the results. So at 12 months, they had enough literature with the Atkins, Weight Watchers, and Jenny Craig program. And they found with the Atkins diet, there was a 1.5% increase in weight loss when people were on the program as opposed to the control group, which just had education coaching alone. So there was a benefit, and that's statistically significant. It's not huge. Weight Watchers at 12 months compared to just education and coaching alone, there was a 2.6% increase in the weight loss, if you will. So weight loss increased by 2.6% compared to just getting coached alone. And with the Jenny Craig, it was actually the best as far as the 12-month results, and it was 4.9% increased benefit, increased weight loss compared to just coaching alone. Now on the OptiFast, they only found literature up to 5 months. So when people are on the OptiFast program for 5 months, so this is a replacement, a low-calorie meal replacement, and they found that there was 6.5% increase in the amount of weight that was lost in comparison to just coaching alone. So good studies. Short term, that was, I guess, the shortcoming of the study is it only goes to 12 months. But most of the studies in the literature, they only go to 6 or 12 months. So again, this is showing slight superiority in the Atkins versus coaching, a little bit more strength with Weight Watchers, and then Jenny Craig was a top at 12 months program. Now, here's another question that is provocative. Well, why go on a program at all? Why not just do it yourself? So there's actually a specific study that analyzed that. Are programs better than just doing it yourself, or DIY, as opposed to not DUI, DIY, do it yourself program? So this study appeared in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, and it appeared quite recently, just last year in August. And it studied the efficacy of commercial weight management programs compared with do-it-yourself approach. So a great question that we asked right at the outset. So weight loss versus do-it-yourself is a randomized clinical trial. It included 3 countries, the States, UK, and Canada. They included 376 adults, and it was a 12-month follow-up. So this is a standalone randomized controlled trial, not a meta-analysis. And it's a good design. So these are the results. So they did find that when you're on a program, which is in the lighter color here, commercial weight management program, and they looked at any program that is on the market, the people that were on the program, and this was a prospective randomized control study, had significantly more weight loss than those that just did it on their own as well. And here you see the weight in kilograms. They lost about 4.5 kilograms at 12 months when they were on a program, and they only lost about just a little shy of 2 kilograms. So there was about a 3 kilogram increase in weight loss when you enrolled in a commercial program as opposed to doing it alone. So this is also important, which gives some strength to commercial programs, weight loss programs, and randomized controlled, no bias, no funding by the company. The only shortcoming is that it only goes to 12 months and not beyond. So we can see so far from the first few studies that we looked at that the commercial weight loss programs appear to have sufficient evidence to say that they work. They are effective. They're more effective than coaching. They're more effective than doing it yourself. But the only limitation so far is that they only go to 12 months. So you can rest assured if you want to lose weight for 3, 6, and 12 months, that you're going to have benefit from a structured weight loss program. However, we can't say from these studies so far, we can't say what happens beyond 12 months. Now, this is where we start looking at long-term results. Now, the literature is a bit anemic and really short of good, solid studies on long-term results. But I did find one, and that is in the Medical Clinics of North America, 2018. And it talked about maintenance of lost weight and long-term management of obesity. A really well-designed study. So 2018, there's meta-analysis of 29 different studies looking at long-term results beyond a year. And it was a 5-year follow-up. So they looked at all the studies that went up to 5 years. So this is important, and this is strong as far as a study. And the parameter that they were measuring is a percent of weight that was regained after the 12 months. So they're looking at, okay, so you lost your weight at 12 months. That's wonderful. But are you going to be able to keep that weight off? So they looked at the parameters, the percent of weight regained versus the years after the weight loss program. In the first year, 35% of people regained the weight. Or I should say, there was 35% weight regained. 35% of the weight that was lost in the first 12 months was regained in the first year. In the second year, it's 55% of the weight was regained. So half the weight that was lost in the first 12 months was regained within the first 2 years. In the third year, it went up to 65% of the weight regained. Fourth year went up to 70%. And look at this, at 5 years, the majority of the weight that was lost in that first year of the program was regained. So the patients that were studied in multiple of these studies at 5 years, 80% of the weight that they lost was regained again. So this is rather disparaging to say, okay, so you did great in the first 6 months and 12 months, but at 5 years, most people will lose will lose the effectiveness, if you will, or will regain 80% of the weight that they lost in the first year. So it's a very sobering study saying that while it's great to lose weight with the weight loss industrial programs, commercial programs in the first 6 and 12 months, and you can do that, and there's evidence for that, but beyond the first year, even at 2 years, 50% of that weight that was lost will be regained. And at 5 years, 80% of the weight that was lost was regained. So if you're looking at long-term weight control, those results are rather discouraging. So then we're going to say, okay, so then what are the factors that have been demonstrated to help weight control long-term? Because if the default mode is that we're going to regain the weight after the first 12 months, then what can we do? What does the literature show? What is evidence-based that says, okay, how can we mitigate that risk that we're going to regain all that weight, all that effort that we put in the first 6 and 12 months? So these are the factors that resulted in the increased likelihood that you'll control the weight, that you'll keep the weight off. So, and I'll just put the study right beside it. We won't analyze specifically every detail of the study, but I assure you that these studies are well designed. I looked at them. They were either randomized, controlled. They were not funded by the companies, and they were also consistent in other studies. It wasn't just one isolated studies. So if you remain on the program for more than 2 years, your likelihood of keeping the weight off increases significantly. So in other words, don't stop at a year and say, okay, I've lost all this weight. I'm just going to do it on my own from now on, but I'm going to stay structured into that program that I started. And if you stay and tough it out for 2 years, if you will, and incidentally, don't pick a program that's too tough. Pick a sustainable program that you can be on for more than 2 years, and ideally for a lifetime. So something that's sustainable, something that you enjoy, something that where you're not hungry all the time, you're not craving. So people that stay on their program for over 2 years, so we can assume that these are sustainable programs that are still enjoyable as far as food experiences and so forth, and they're not starving you, then according to the American Clinical Nutrition Journal 2005, your success rate is going to be much, much higher. This is key, and this appears in many, many articles, and that is sleep over 7 hours. This is a randomized control study in the Sleep Journal. This is huge as far as maintaining weight loss. And so if you sleep at least 7 hours a night, your likelihood of keeping the weight off that you lost increases significantly. And this comes from many, many studies. And there's various physiological reasons for that. One of which is the increase in cortisol when you're sleep deprived. And you ever notice, like, if you ever have like a rough night and you're sleep deprived, if you're on shifts, that you wake up just ravishingly hungry for high calorie food like fatty acids. Well, there's a reason for that. And that is your cortisol level goes up when you're sleep deprived. And cortisol is like a steroid, and it drives appetite, particularly appetite for calorie laced foods like fat, like that. I hate to say it, but like a McDonald's, like greasy cheeseburger, sausage, fries, like things that are really fatty. That's a natural physiological response. So of course it's going to fight you when you're trying to lose weight. So sleep cannot be underestimated. It's absolutely huge in terms of weight control, getting at least 7 hours of sleep. Now, studies look at activity level. Some studies say 30 minutes of activity is sufficient, but definitely an hour of activity daily, according to the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, will significantly increase your likelihood to keep the weight off and keep your weight controlled after you've lost the weight and you've reached your target. It does not have to be the gym. It does not have to be extraordinarily burdensome. It's just a walk, a bike ride, a swim, just as long as you're moving your body, and just as long as you're moving your body. It could be like vacuuming in the house. Like, any activity has been shown for an hour, for sure, an hour total per day of activity, or in some cases, even 30 minutes was sufficient to result in increased weight control. Lower disinhibition. So what does disinhibition mean? Well, this is a psychological phenomenon. So this is from the Biopsychosocial Medicine Journal quite recently, just in the last 5 years. Disinhibition really, when you lower disinhibition, basically it's having impulse control, if you will. So avoiding impulsive eating, eating when you're emotionally distressed, eating on spec. You just like see something in the fridge and you just grab it and you eat it. So this is sort of that's disinhibition. So you're not inhibited from eating. You just go out and you eat. You eat randomly. You eat excessively because it's on impulse and there's no inhibition. So definitely lower disinhibition. Manage food addictions, particularly addictions to sugar and addictions to fat. And in some cases, this is going to require psychological help. It's going to potentially require like a group of friends that are supportive. It may require some accountability, but food addiction is very real. In many studies, food addicts have the same PET scan brain activity as a cocaine addict, that it does stimulate that portion of the brain that is addictive, that craves, that has withdrawal for the substance. So sugar can be as addictive, and many studies show that it is, as cocaine, for example. So managing that, and it's easier said than done. And as I say, sometimes it requires professional help. Psychological motivation was actually a factor in terms of increasing the likelihood of weight control. So what does that mean? So essentially, some people will be told by their doctor, you got to lose your weight to get your blood pressure under control, to get your type 2 diabetes under control. That is not a good motivator, according to the studies. But if you come to terms with the fact that, hey, listen, I'm going to feel a lot better. I'm going to move around a lot easier. I'm going to feel good about how I look. That's a psychological motivation. And studies have shown consistently that when you're psychologically motivated, as opposed to just medically motivated to try and avoid medical conditions, but if you're psychologically motivated, your likelihood of keeping the weight off increases substantially. So in conclusion, we just cycle back to the summary and then answer the question. So are major weight loss programs effective? In the short term, definitely. So low carb, low fat, Weight Watchers, OptiFast, they're effective up to 12 months with really solid evidence in the clinical literature, unbiased, solid evidence of meta-analysis and randomized control studies. So short term is good. The long term is a difficult one. So long-term relapse and long-term gaining of the weight that was lost in the first 12 months is very real. And 50% of the lost weight is regained by 2 years and 80% is regained by 8 years. So by 5 years, I should say. So it's important to note that the key is going to be long-term weight control. And are programs better than just doing it on your own or just getting some coaching? Yes, absolutely. Particularly, again, in the first 12 months. Now, we covered the importance of maintaining weight control because that's the biggest challenge. It's not losing the weight in the first 6 months and 12 months. It's keeping it off. So you have to look for a sustainable program, something that you can see yourself doing for the rest of your life. So nothing like radical where you're starving, you're urinating ketones, you're essentially in a starving state. Those are generally not sustainable. So sustainable program that you can live with, that you feel comfortable with, and you can still enjoy life with. Sleep over 7 hours. Stay active for a minimum of 30 minutes, but preferably an hour a day. It doesn't have to be a huge, intense program in the gym or pounding or lifting heavy weights, just active. Control impulsive and binge eating, easier said than done. And then that you're psychologically motivated. You've come to the terms of the fact that, hey, listen, I'm going to feel a lot better. I'm going to feel a lot better if I finally lose this weight. And you may have tried it for many times. You may have tried it several times. If you look at cigarette addiction, for example, the average smoker that quits has tried 7 times before they finally get to that point. So if you have a relapse in your weight management program, pick yourself back up again. Sure, easier said than done. But the key is not to give up because it may take several attempts to get to that point and come to the fact that, hey, listen, I'm going to feel a lot better. If you can get that motivation of saying, I'm going to feel a lot better, then you're way better off than if you say, oh, my doctor told me to lose the weight. So, that's the key. So that's a lot of information to cover. And I thank you. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm just going to put up the email up here. So Doc Talk with Dr. G will be on every Thursday at 7:30, and we'll be live. We have taken up the time now. I was very ambitious in terms of covering all the information regarding the investigation of the weight loss industry. I hope you found this very helpful, and I've tried to cover it as objectively and as fairly as possible without any commercial or profit interest. So just in conclusion, I thank you so much for your attention. I really love doing this. It takes a tremendous amount of preparation, as you can imagine. It takes hours and hours of literature search and digging in the literature, but I do very much enjoy it. I would be also very grateful if you could support this program. It's basically listener supported. So in order to keep it sustained, I ask for your donations. If you're enjoying this program, then you can donate to doctalkwithdrg@gmail.com. And with any $60 donation or more, I will send you the expose of life in medicine. This is becoming one of the best sellers in the freedom movement. We've sold over 1,500 copies. And I'll send you that book as well as the Children Speak, the Children Perspective on what's happening. Those I will send for you for any donation over $60. You'll get both these books actually shipped to you, and that's actually less than you would if you ordered the books directly. So I'd appreciate that. I appreciate your support. Also, keep in mind, I've already had several people approach me for one-on-one coaching, one-on-one guidance and navigation through the literature to look at evidence-based medicine to answer any of your questions, whether it be a health-related question for yourself, prevention program, any topic related to health and wellness. I'd be honored to work with you on that one. And we've had it so far, and I've had some really encouraging reviews from those programs. So Doc Talk with Dr. G, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next Thursday at 7:30. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have any topics that you'd like to suggest, you can email me at doctalkwithdrg@gmail.com. This is Dr. Imad G reporting from the beautiful shores of Barrie, Ontario. And have a wonderful evening, and may God bless you.